Hello, hello, hello. Come on in. Hi, everybody. I am Crista Cowan. I'm the corporate genealogist with Ancestry, and I'm doing a little takeover of the Family Search and RootsTech accounts today. So you could be joining us on one of their accounts or on the Ancestry Facebook. Please in the comments say hello, where you're watching from. We're so excited to have you here. Now, if you've been following along today on my Instagram or Facebook or over on the Family Search or RootsTech Facebook, you know I shared a little story. And so I'm going to share that story and then the rest of the story. And then I'm going to share another little story. And all of that is going to be in service of your family history journey. So there are 3 things that I have learned lately or have had just really clarified to me lately that are important for all of us as we climb our family trees. And I want to share those things with you today. So we're going to spend about a half an hour together. I'll share that information. And then, like I said, if you want to just say hello and let us know where you're watching from, that would be amazing. So here's the story. I spent the month of January making a list of 26 things that I want to do in 2026. A couple of them are really big things, like go to Antarctica, and some of them are fairly small things. But that list was really intentional, and it was something that I put together and put a lot of thought into. And last week, I had the opportunity to sit down with 2 of my dearest friends, and they had also gone through this exercise, and we shared our lists with each other. Now, our lists are very different. We are very different people, the 3 of us. We have different interests. We have different goals in life. We're kind of at different stages in life because of our family situations and whatnot. But sharing those lists with one another, I really just had this moment where I realized that there were 3 really powerful things happening in that moment. And I wrote them down because I wanted to make sure that I shared them with you all, because there is a connection here to family history. And the first thing is that word, connection. There is something really powerful that happens when we connect with each other over our family history. It becomes this point of connection for all sorts of reasons. Maybe it's because we just love family history and it's exciting to share that with people who also love family history. Maybe it's because we discover we have a common ancestor, or maybe it's because our ancestors experienced a common thing. Now, these 2 friends that I was gathered with last week, one of them, she and I have recently discovered a 3rd connection that we have with each other. The first one I shared at RootsTech last year. So if you had the opportunity to come to RootsTech last year or to watch my presentation about what's new at Ancestry, you heard me tell the story about the ship, the Amazon. It was a ship that came from England to the United States in 1863, and then all 900 or so passengers made their way across the United States in the middle of the Civil War to Utah. And what this dear friend and I uncovered was that we both had ancestors who were on the same sailing of that same ship. And that connection has been really meaningful to us. Now, for her and I, that was our 2nd connection. Our first connection came when we discovered her husband DNA tested, her son DNA tested, and on my Ancestry DNA match list and my dad's and my grandma's, her son and her husband appear, because her husband and I are 5th cousins. And so that has been a fun connection between us as well. Well, the 3rd connection just happened just a couple of weeks ago when I mentioned in passing to another colleague here at Ancestry that my grandmother lived in Tarzana, California. It's in North Los Angeles, and that's where my dad was raised. And her ears perked up and she said, how did I miss that? Now, I don't know how she missed that because she knew my grandma. She has been down to Southern California with me to visit. I just don't think the name of the town clicked. And when I mentioned that, she said, my great-great-grandma lived in Tarzana when she died. And so I got some information from her. Her great-great-grandmother had moved down to Southern California from Utah to live with one of her sons at the end of her life. She ended up living there, I think, for almost 15 years. And so it just so happens that my parents are here visiting and they're at my house. And so I went home from work that night and I said, Dad, did you know the Bells when you were growing up? And he said, Grandma Bell, of course. Like she was the grandma to everybody. And so that was this fun connection that my dad has these stories and these memories of this great-great-grandmother of a friend of mine. So we're not related to the Bells, but my dad has stories now to share with my friend. So as you think about your family history journey, here is what I would love for you to do. Laura just said her grandmother lived in Tarzana too. Laura, we're going to have to talk. Okay. So here's what I want you to do though. I want you to be on the lookout for connections. And not just family history, we're related connections. Those are fun, and I think they're important. And I can't wait to do relatives at RootsTech with all of you. But also be looking for connections to place and time, because those connections can really inspire you and motivate you and be an encouragement to keep going. And so think about here as we're celebrating or getting ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, for example. I have gone through my tree and I have made a note of everyone in my tree who served in the Revolutionary War, either in the military or offered patriotic service. And now what I'm doing is I'm going back through that list of individuals, male and female, and I am trying to see if they served in the military, what captain did they serve under, what regiment did they serve in, because I suspect that I will have friends and associates who have ancestors who served in the same company with some of my ancestors. So connections are not just familial connections. Those connections can be any number of things. And so as I sat with my friends last week and we shared our list of 26 things we want to do in 2026, it just really was brought home to me, this idea of the importance of connection and how we connect to one another. And family history not only provides a great vehicle for that, but those connections can keep us motivated in our family history journey. So that was the very first powerful lesson that I learned. So here's what I would love to hear from you in the chat or the comments, wherever you're watching today, is if you have made some kind of serendipitous or interesting or unusual or surprising connection while doing your family history. Okay, I would just love to hear about that. And as those come in, we can talk about those a little bit more. Yeah, like neighbors are, some of you are mentioning that. Like if you start to track where your ancestors lived, learning who lived in the neighborhood, who worked with them, who worshiped with them, who migrated with them, starting to create networks of those individuals and tracking the information about them gives you more opportunities for points of connection, which I just think is so fun. Okay, the second lesson that I learned that pertains to family history as I sat with my friends last week has to do with curiosity. And here's where I just want to share another little story. So I have 7 nibblings. And we don't tell my sister that, but I'm pretty sure I'm the favorite aunt. There are 6 nephews and then the world's only niece. And the oldest is 21 and the youngest is 13. And so they're all pretty close-ish in age. And I love spending time with them one-on-one. I love spending time with them all together. Like I will do anything I can just about to spend time with the nibblings. And I love that I was intentional enough about that early in their life that now as they are getting older, they sometimes seek me out. It just makes my heart so happy. So my nephew number 2 is currently serving an LDS mission in Washington State. And I get this little Facebook message from him a couple of weeks ago. And all it is it's a picture that he has taken a screenshot of his family tree fan chart from Family Search. So it's just him in the middle, right? You know what a fan chart is, him in the middle, and then his parents and grandparents and so on. It goes out to about, I think the 6th or 7th, I think it's the 7th generation. And so he sends me this screenshot of his family tree chart. And I was like, that's weird. Okay. Well, then just a minute later, he sends me another screenshot. And what he's done is he has zoomed in on one little spot on the 7th generation of his family tree. And in his entire family tree, back to 7 generations, that is the only hole. That is the only blank spot for this kid in his family tree. And then he writes me just one little message, and it just says, "What's going on here?" And I had the opportunity to then explain to him that after 40 years of research, I have still not figured out who the parents are of my John O'Brien. That's my mom's great-grandfather. He was born in 1832 or 1837 or 1841, depending on which lie of his you believe. And he was born in either Iowa or Ohio or Ireland, because he also could never tell a straight story about that. And then his name's John O'Brien, like to top it all off, right? Like the most common Irish name ever. And so it's been really difficult to nail down which John O'Brien is him. I know exactly when and where he enlisted in the Civil War for the state of Iowa. I know where he ended up a decade and a half later in Arkansas, ends up getting married and having children, one of whom is my great-grandmother that I'm named after. Like, we have lots of information about the latter part of his life, but very little information about the early part of his life, because there are at least 11 John O'Briens that I've been able to identify that were living in that part of Iowa in the 1860s when he enlisted in the Civil War. So it's been a brick wall for us for a very long time. Now I am circling around with ancestry DNA matches, and I'm getting closer and closer and closer to figuring out who he is. But sometimes, and I bet you have felt this too, with brick walls in your family tree, it can be a little bit discouraging or a little bit demoralizing when you think you've done everything you could possibly do and you just haven't been able to break through that brick wall. And this is a brick wall we have pounded on a lot over the years. And so sometimes I just set it aside, right? I call it a 40-year brick wall, but really, probably in 40 years, I suspect I've only spent maybe 200 or 300 hours working on it, which when you spread that over 40 years is not that much. But you set it aside for a while, and you kind of think, oh, well, I'm never gonna solve that. That's never gonna happen. That's too hard, or the record doesn't exist yet, or I'm waiting for the right person to take a DNA test. Well, having my nephew send me this message and showing his own curiosity about this hole in his family tree that he didn't know or understand gave me the opportunity to share with him. And I sent him a message back that just explained who John O'Brien was and what we've done over the years to try to find him. Now, in true 19-year-old boy fashion, his singular word, one syllable response to me after I typed all of that out was, "Dang." And I don't know if he's really that curious enough, but I suspect that maybe some kind of curiosity has been sparked in him, at least enough to ask the question. But here's what it did for me, is that it reinvigorated me to go back and look at things again about John O'Brien, to take one more look at the DNA match list, to take one more look to see if there's new records that have come online at Ancestry or at Family Search that'll help me figure out more of the pieces of the puzzle about this man's life. So one of the things that I think all of us need to encourage a little bit more in ourselves and in the members of our family is just curiosity. That is one of the things that I love about RootsTech, is that it gives me the opportunity to just appease my curiosity. So here's the next thing I would love to hear from you about in the comments. I would love to know if you are planning on attending RootsTech in person, or if you're going to be joining us online. So in person or online. If your answer is not one of those two things, I want to know what you're even doing with your life. Like, I hope you're planning on attending and joining us, because if you haven't looked at the schedule yet, there are so many interesting classes being taught. Now, I'm a little biased because I'm teaching 4 of them. So I hope that you will come and at least participate in some of my classes. 2 of those are going to be streamed live. So for those of you who are joining online, you'll be able to watch or participate in 2 of those classes. But as I was looking through the schedule, here's the problem I ran into. And you might have the same problem. Because I am just such an innately curious person, I want to take all the classes. Like, I want to learn about all of the things. Some of them are very applicable to my own family history research and what I'm doing right now. But some of them are just things that I'm like, that sounds fun. I want to learn more about that. And I want to give you permission, whether you're coming in person or watching online, and it looks like we've got all sorts of people come. Oh, some of you are coming online. Some of you are coming in person. Okay, some of you are coming in person and you're coming to the booth sessions. Yes, I will also be doing a couple of sessions in the exhibit hall in the Ancestry booth, some of those booth demos. I think we're doing a session on Saturday called Stump the Genealogist. But the idea is, take a class that has nothing to do with your family tree. So I'm giving you the permission to do that. I hope your curiosity will lead you to do that, because curiosity is probably one of the best tools you can have in your toolbox as a genealogist, is just to show curiosity. And I have found that when I take a class that has nothing to do with my family history, but simply because it's something I'm curious about, that there are a couple of things that happen. One of them is, almost always, I learned something that is applicable to my family history, something unexpected, something that gives me a new methodology or a new way of looking at things that I didn't expect. It also gives me the opportunity to learn something new that I can then pass on, teach others, connect with others on. So I really, really hope that you will take the opportunity to look through the schedule. And you can find that at rootstech.org, right? The schedule is there in the menu. Look at the schedule and pick out at least one class that has nothing to do with your family history. So, connection, curiosity, and the third thing that I learned as I sat on that couch last week with my friends, sharing our 26 things for 2026, was how important community is when we're trying to accomplish things in our lives. Now, for some of you, your family history work may be something that you feel compelled to accomplish. For some of you, it may just be something you explore. For some of you, it may just be a hobby. And for some of you, like me, it may be a complete and total obsession. So I have a podcast. The podcast is called Stories That Live in Us. And this last week on the podcast, I interviewed this young man named Noah. And Noah tells this story about being a 13-year-old little boy in Birmingham, Alabama, dragging his grandma around. Not his grandma dragging him around. He was dragging his grandma around to cemeteries. And he would put on his little backpack and his parents would drop him off at the public library, because this little boy was obsessed with family history. So some of you get the obsession, right? For some of you, this may not be at an obsession level yet, but some of you get the obsession. And so as Noah shared this story with me last week on the podcast about little Noah being so proud of himself now that he's a professional genealogist, it just was such this really beautiful full circle moment. But as he shared the things that he shared about his journey to become a genealogist, I realized once again, how important community is to accomplishing the things that we want to accomplish in our lives. I think that's true of everything, but it certainly is true of family history. So when you come to RootsTech, whether you participate in person, whether you participate online, just by fact of being here today and watching this live, you are part of a community. You're part of a community of people who are engaged in family history, who are curious about climbing their family tree, who are interested in making those connections to other people in very real and very meaningful and powerful ways. If that's the only community that you have is RootsTech once a year, I'm going to challenge you to find more community in family history spaces. Make sure you're following the Family Search and RootsTech Facebook and Instagram accounts. Make sure you're following the Ancestry Facebook and Instagram accounts. Come follow me on Instagram. We will help connect you with communities that are relevant to you and to the family history work that you're doing. So there are local genealogical societies. There are national genealogical societies. There are other conferences that happen throughout the year. I often attend at least 3 or 4 genealogy conferences throughout the year. And Ancestry is looking at hosting some additional events in places at least around the United States and possibly in some other countries as well. And so that's exciting when you can find your people and connect with them. I run an online community that's kind of like a cross between a genealogy society and a slumber party, right? So there are in-person meetups, there are conferences, there are online groups, but when you find your community, you get the support that you need to do the things that you want to do in your life. And that's what I learned last week, sitting with my friends as we shared our list of things we want to accomplish this year, even though our lists are very different, just by nature of sharing them in community, we now have the support that we need. We have people to check in on us and check up on us and keep us motivated. We have people to spur on our curiosity, and we have people to help us connect with each other and with other people. So the last thing that I would love to hear from you today in the chat is if any of you are a member of a really great genealogy society. Maybe it's an online community, maybe it's an in-person meetup once a month or once a quarter. Maybe it's just another conference that you go to in your part of the world. But share that list here in the comments so that other people have that as a resource, whether you're watching us live today or whether you're watching this replay later. We want people to be able to dive into the comments and see what you are loving in the genealogy community. Is there a specific society that has a really great magazine? Is there an online community that has really great meetups or really great teachers that come? Is there another conference you go to? Tell me all about it. Okay, so that is what I have prepared for you today. We do have a couple more minutes, and it looks like there's a few questions that have come in, and so I'm happy to answer those. It also looks like there's some really fun comments that have come in as I've been kind of watching these scroll by. I'm just going to remind Laura, you said you had a grandmother who lived in Tarzana too. You need to find me. Find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram. Tell me all about your grandmother, because Tarzana is not a large community. And so I would love to know if I knew her or if my dad knew her. That would be super fun. Suzanne says she has more brick walls than breakthroughs. Suzanne, I hear you. That can be really frustrating. But there are resources available to help you through those brick walls. I do a thing called Brick Wall Busters. I do that with my community about once every other month or so. And it's just one of my favorite things to do, is to help people kind of see their brick walls in a different way. There are genealogical societies who do something similar. So kind of look around and see if you can find a resource for that. Okay, some of you are coming to RootsTech in person. Love to see that. Some of you, genealogy is your obsession. Yes, I hear you, Sharon, Gail. So Gail says, my grandson said, I do not have an obsession, but a spiritual passion. I love the framing of that. Maybe sounds a little better than an obsession. Okay, couple of questions here. Carol says, I have a cousin who died at 1 year old. Ancestry has given me lots of hints that are not hers, but her sister's. How do I get those hints to the correct person? Yeah, so one of the things to keep in mind is as you're doing family history research, often, whether you're on Ancestry or Family Search, the algorithms are trying to deliver up information to you, and hints or suggested records. Those are some of the ways that happens. And so you can click through to those records, click around on the record. What'll happen is it'll rotate some things, and that will allow you to then save it to anybody in your tree that you want. You also can just go search for the record and find it, and then save it again to anybody you want to. Okay, I'm seeing some of you are starting to share the genealogical societies that you're a part of. Emily says, I love the St. Louis Genealogical Society. They have great projects that they work on that are super meaningful to me, as my ancestors are from St. Louis. So that's a really important point that Emily makes. Don't just think about who you can gather in community with in a local genealogical society in your area, but think about what genealogical societies exist in the places where your ancestors lived, because they might have additional records that aren't online anywhere else. They might have a magazine or a newsletter that they put out that has tips for doing research in that local area. There might be other genealogists or librarians or individuals in that society who you could trade research with. If they'll go do a lookup in their local archive and you can go do a lookup in your local archive. So that kind of collecting those genealogy karma points, right? When you connect with people and are willing to serve in those communities, is a really great reminder. Let's see, Lois says she started a small group of genealogy researchers that meet once a month via Zoom to exchange ideas, solve problems, and share family news. I love that, Lois. Sometimes we have to create our own communities. That's what I did with my community that I sponsor or host, and that works too. So find a community or start your own. And then finally, Linda says here, living in a small town of 10,000, all of the Black people were in the same neighborhood or in the same part of town. So I knew some of the folks, but it was cool to see some of the folks my grandparents had in their neighborhood, because my uncle always told me we were kin to folks not only in our county, but some of the surrounding areas. Linda, that's such a beautiful reminder of the fact that we live in communities now, and I hope that we'll expand those communities in ways that we can. But our ancestors also lived in the communities. And it's, I think, a really beautiful thing to figure out not just who our ancestors were, but what their lives were like. Where did they work? Where did they worship? Who did they immigrate with? Who did they migrate with? What did they grow? As you dig into the lives and stories of those people, you start to understand their community as well. And then I think that helps us see the ways in which we are all more connected. Well, let me just remind you one more time, the 3 things that I feel like I need, and hopefully you'll find some value in this as well, in order to just continue to find all the joy in this obsession that is family history, climbing my family tree. The first one is connection. Finding ways to connect to our ancestors through their stories, finding ways to connect to other people who either have the same ancestors or who have ancestors who were in those same circles of connection. I think that's so important. Number 2 is curiosity. When we are curious about new things, when we are curious about the lives of our ancestors, when we can spark curiosity in the children or grandchildren or nibblings in our lives, that curiosity, I think, is always rewarded. And then number 3, the beauty that is the family history community. Thank you all for being part of our family history community here at Ancestry and at Family Search. I am excited for RootsTech. It is coming up in just a few weeks, and I promise I'll be ready. And I'm excited to see and see some of you in person and to hear a little bit about some of the things that you learned at RootsTech. We'll do a little follow-up session afterwards. So until next time, I'm Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.